like, if Olelo can do this, is you mentioned House Bill 477 that's on the move. So what I'd like is if they can flash up that screen that shows the two bills that are moving, House Bill 477. And I really like that piece about opening up more dispensary locations, because you realize how little access there is actually on the island of Oahu. And then also Senate Bill 1139, which also provides more funding and positions for Michelle's office. And then it has a task force in there that will look at a potential dual system program. So, you know, we're having the conversations about legalization, but we're taking it and we're doing it in a very deliberate way. The status of both of these bills is that they will be heard, or are they're waiting for their last committees to be heard in, and then, you know, we're off to conference if they both make it through. I'd like to bring on now Nikos Leverenz. And so Nikos and Bill, welcome. Nikos is the board president of Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii, which is one of the partners in this arena of medical cannabis for a long time. So I wanted to ask Nikos, thank you for being here on the program. What does, can you tell us a little bit about Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii?
Thank you for the invitation, Representative Belatti. Great to be here. Drug Policy Forum is the state's oldest nonprofit dedicated to drug policy reform. We were partially an outgrowth of the work around establishing our state's very successful statewide syringe access program. We've had a publicly funded syringe exchange program here in Hawaii for 30 years, and it's been really successful in keeping HIV rates low amongst injection drug users. So we believe that the current punitive approach to drug use has to come to an end, and we need to move toward a public health approach for drug use and other behavioral health problems. We were very involved in getting Hawaii's medical cannabis law passed in 2000, and we're also very involved in getting the medical cannabis dispensary law passed in 2015. Before, the Drug Policy Forum used to actually be a forum. We would partner with UH and invite speakers from the continent and sometimes here to present, topics on drugs, and we might be going back to that soon. But nowadays, we do public education through policy discussions in media outlets and in forums like this. And we also submit our opinions on bills before the legislature. So we support medical cannabis, we support adult use legalization of cannabis, and we also support the decriminalization of personal drug possession and use, which is in alignment with the American Public Health Association and the Global Commission on Drug Policy, and people who are aware that substance use disorder must be treated. And we don't think that somebody has to be involved in the criminal legal system in order to access treatment.
So, wonderful organization. And I remember working with Drug Policy Forum on the medical dispensary laws. Personally, Nikos, how did you come to be involved in the cannabis issues? And how did you come to be involved in it when you returned to Hawaii?
Well, I've been interested in drug policy since we kind of knew each other back in high school. And I remember this one graphic that looked at the relative severity of various substances. And cannabis, which is high on the list, did not have the same, negative impact that, say, alcohol and tobacco does. So that's always really resonated with me. And then I came across a great book by an author named Peter McWilliams called Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do, The Absurdity of Consensual Crimes in a Free Society. Then I went to law school and studied criminal law, and I saw how our drug laws and the enforcement of our drug laws, played such a long and deep role in subjecting, non-white communities to intergenerational cycles of incarceration, under education and economic instability, and actually worsen health outcomes too. So, after law school, I worked around the legislative process for a little bit as a staffer, as a consultant, and it's also an advocate. So I worked for Drug Policy Alliance in California, and I worked on issues ranging from medical cannabis. California was the first state that passed the medical cannabis law through the ballot box in 1996, Compassionate Use Act. I worked on syringe access, which is still regrettably a contentious issue there. Civil asset forfeiture reform, which your legislature has been addressing, and hopefully we'll get something to the governor's desk this year. And also corrections reform and sentencing reform. And these are things that need addressing here as well. I also wrote a bill to ban random student drug testing in California public schools that passed by 2/3 in both houses, with the opposition of the Office of National Drug Control Policy at the time. And unfortunately, that was vetoed, but we have a climate there where that didn't happen. So I first came to these issues here in Hawaii. I paid a little bit of attention with student drug testing. I was in a HPR debate, I believe, with Peter Carlisle and Andy Bumatai. And that was the very first radio interview I ever did. And I think this was in 2004. So when I came back to Hawaii to live, I was invited to the Act 230 working group by Pam Lichty, the president emerita and co-founder of Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii. And I've been involved in some capacity ever since.
Well, we're lucky to have you here. So, Nikos, you were listening to, I believe, what Michelle was saying about, the program at the Department of Health and what Bill was saying. And I kind of want us to have a little bit of a dialogue here. So the two questions I would kind of pose to both of you, first to you, Nikos, is what would you like to see happen within the medical cannabis industry moving forward here? If we can get some feedback from Bill. And then also for both of you, what are some reasonable recommendations or steps both of you would suggest lawmakers take as the cannabis industry continues to grow here in Hawaii? So Nikos, you first.
Well, I think we heard some very good news from Michelle, and it's nice to have an effective Department of Health, and we think that in terms of providing edible products to consumers, many people, myself included, when I was a medical cannabis patient back in California, edibles were my preferred delivery mechanism. So to the extent that the rules can come out and give dispensaries guidance on that, that would be great. I believe that we should look more into breaking vertical integration, even if just between dispensaries, so that particular cultivars can be transported between dispensaries, and maybe invite more businesses to engage in like delivery and some other supply services. And I also think I would like to see dispensaries be more vocal with our congressional delegation about the need to pass the Safe Banking Act, which directly impacts their bottom line right now, as well as the MORE Act, which would remove cannabis from the Federal Controlled Substances Act.
Bill, you want to respond to any of that? Because I think, edibles, advocacy at the national level, all good things. Any thoughts, Bill?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points that Nikos made. I think delivery, you think of a lot of patients just don't have the ability to even get into a dispensary. We're not like Starbucks. We're not on every corner. There's only 7 today on all of Oahu, and similar numbers, in fact, smaller numbers on a lot of the neighbor islands. So delivery seems like a logical choice. It's also from a cost perspective. The cost of standing up one of these facilities can run $500,000 to $1 million. Contractors kind of know they've got you. There's a lot of security that you have to put in place, cameras, fencing, those sorts of things, safes, all those kinds of things. It really drives up the cost. Delivery is a good option. It's a convenient option. I tried it as just kind of a social experiment in Arizona a couple years ago. And I was literally sitting by the pool in a condo that I'd rented for the week, and I was just shocked. It was so convenient. I'd also say reducing the friction in the process of getting a card. I can get prescribed opioids today, and all I do is run down to the neighborhood Longs, and I get the medicine. To even set foot in our store, you have to go see a doctor and get essentially a prescription. It's a little different than that, but that's the equivalent. You have to pay a couple $100. You have to pay a fee to the state. There's a lot of friction just to set foot in our store. Nikos mentioned product options, and I agree. And the final thing that I'd say would really help, and I understand this is a sensitive topic, and it's around advertising. It's very, very hard to get an industry off the ground where you can't even tell your consumers about the product. It's very, very challenging, and just I think an unnecessary barrier.
So I'm going to give the last 30 seconds. I think those are great recommendations, Bill. Last 30 seconds, Nikos, what would you recommend to take as reasonable steps for lawmakers?
I think reasonable decriminalization needs to be the threshold needs to be heightened by to 30 grams per SB 758. We also need employment protections for medical cannabis patients, and hopefully we can get to that real soon.
Thank you both. I think we could be on for another hour and would have such a great discussion. I hope you folks will come back to talk stories sometime in the future, but thank you so much.